Well, hello then. This is Tom Tresser, civic educator, on the line with Marissa Lynn Ford from the League of Chicago Theaters, reviewing a little bit of history of this amazing organization. Arts and political organizing in Chicago from around 1990 to 2000-ish. Um, Around 2000, Richard Florida came out with this book, The Rise of the Creative Class, calling attention to the fact that maybe tens of millions of people if not more, work in the creative sector, and maybe hundreds of millions of people are consuming and supporting the arts in America annually. So this was a big deal for a while. And what I want to know from that work and work like it is, if there's a creative class, is there creative class consciousness? And if so, what would it look like? And would that serve in some way to guide us in our public life, guiding policies and laws, much like I guess you could say environmental consciousness or feminine consciousness or liberation consciousness might guide us in our politics. I learned about this particular work from called the Arts Democratic Club, but I got a travel grant from MacArthur in 1990 to visit 6 cities in America to see what was being done for the arts in those cities, being done by the arts community themselves, as well as from what the business community was doing and what local government was doing. So these cities were Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., New York City, San Francisco, and I was supposed to create a Center for Cultural Policy at Roosevelt University with this information, but that's another story. What really struck me was attending a meeting of the Arts Democratic Club that happened to be ongoing when I got there in the late winter, and it was a prelude to the election that was happening. And candidates for city council were trooping one by one into this performance space to pitch their wares and to tell the audience how great they were going to be for the arts and why this club should endorse them. A few years later, this club did a candidate for all the candidates for mayor. 6 candidates showed up with 500 attendees. And you can see a little bit about how they roll here. They endorsed the candidates and they used their creative means to get the word out and raise money. So inspired by that, I came here back to Chicago and in 1990 created Greater Chicago Citizens for the Arts. And it was the same idea. We were going to endorse candidates for public office who supported the arts and freedom of expression. And they were going to answer a questionnaire, including whether they were about repealing the gag order on federal policy that forbade any entity who was receiving federal money from discussing abortion. So we wanted to know if candidates would either go for the removal of that or they supported it, as well as we asked an open-ended question on their thoughts on freedom of expression generally in America. But for candidates for the state, we specifically asked them would they support a $1 per capita budget for the Illinois Arts Council, which has never achieved that level of funding in its entire history, as well as a 3-to-1 budget for the National Endowment for the Arts. That is to say, $3 for every citizen in America. And of course, the NEA has never gotten anywhere close to that. So that was the questionnaires that we asked. But we did also voter registration. We registered thousands of people to vote. I had students in the registration line at Columbia College and DePaul from the Arts and Theater Department, who were deputy registrars who I trained, and they registered folk to vote. And we collected those names for our work. We published a pretty spiffy newsletter here. It was a membership organization. I think it was like $30 to join. We had maybe 450 registered people who had contributed money to this little organization. And we went through our process and we endorsed candidates. And this was our slate back in 92. We endorsed Carol Moseley Braun for the Senate in the primary when she was an underdog and not receiving really any serious consideration from the media. However, she answered our questions in a superior way. And so we endorsed her and raised thousands of dollars for her including a gala benefit at Park West hosted by Aaron Freeman, full of performance, art for sale, and all other funny stuff. We also um, went to arts fairs with clipboards, for Braun and turned in thousands of signatures. We did this arts and performance rally at Club Lower Links on May 20th, 1991, the first of its kind, I believe, that mixed arts and politics. So there's Aaron Freeman, but also that's Rosemary Mulligan, a Republican candidate for the Illinois House, a pro-abortion candidate who is fighting a very conservative candidate, and who ended up winning her seat by literally one vote. So she was telling the audience that don't believe your votes don't count because I'm here to tell you that they do. Um, the Arts for Braun effort really mobilized pretty much all the important cultural leaders of Northern Illinois to raise money for Carol's campaign, as well as to write her arts and policy platform. That's Jan Sikowski, then state representative, standing in for Carol at a fundraising event in an art collector's home. Of course, now, she's been in Congress since 1999. But I essentially served as a liaison to the Moseley Braun campaign from the arts community for 6 months as a volunteer. And as I say, there's Carol speaking at an event that we did at the Royal George Theater. And this is some of the material we passed out by the thousands, to our people and to people in the arts, saying these candidates are really on board with us. And Carol's campaign published this document, which was in-depth support for the arts and culture in America, way beyond just funding for the arts, the NEA. It talked about arts in tourism, arts in economic development, arts for seniors, arts inside the educational world, and even the importance of arts in urban design and city planning. It was 4 pages. No candidate for the Senate, to my knowledge, ever did anything like it or never has since. Well, we were there on the night Carol won her election, and there you can see a picture I took, as well as a picture pretty much of the same moment from the Chicago Tribune. It was pretty exciting. But we also did the same thing for Luis Gutierrez, who was then a councilman, city councilman, and he was running for Congress for the first time. And he addressed the community, hundreds of people, at Chopin Theater. And he was, very enthusiastic for the arts. That's Michael War, poet and activist. At that time, he was the head of the Guild Complex, reading poetry as part of the performance and speaking that happened at the town meeting. So there we are with then candidate Gutierrez. You can see with the artwork behind us, and there again we did a gallery piece at a Randolph Street Gallery under the direction of Peter Taub, who went on to work at the Museum of Contemporary Art for many, many years, programming there. But at this time, he ran the Randolph Street Gallery. We did a month-long thing with exhibits and speaking called Reimagining America. Now, the league comes in here because they hired me as an organizer, believe it or not. Starting in, I'm going to say the spring of 1990. And they created the Advocacy Committee under the leadership of Rock Schulfer. And we really got to work. I have to say the league broke ground and blazed trails that I'm not sure have been really followed by any other arts organization to my knowledge, to the extent of what was happening then. So the first thing that happened was we printed up these kinds of program stuffers. This performance could be canceled, and stuffed them in programs throughout Chicago's theater community for a certain weekend. And the stage manager would come out and the lights would dim. It was all very dramatic. If you want the lights to stay on in America's theaters, we have to save the NEA, speaking like that. Directing the patrons to fill out the postcards on this document and leave them in a box in the lobby, and we would mail them to the president and to our senators. So there's lots of information on this thing here. Inside the league's own theater newsletter was this op-ed piece by myself called Arts Advocacy, a new movement is born, which led to an actual rally, the first of its kind, as far as I know, in Daley Plaza, hosted by the League with Henry Fogel, Gwendolyn Brooks, Studs Terkel, Spalding Gray, Terry Hemmert, Aaron Freeman, Oscar Martinez, Hollis Siegler, Second City, the Paul Where to Go Band, and much more. And here's you can see a little bit of the coverage of that amazing event, from 1990. And the coverage in the New York in the Sun Times, arts luminaries pack lineup for NEA rally. But I have to say, the thing that is most inspiring and unusual was this. For the first time, theaters combined their subscriber list and donor list, maybe for the only time in history, to do a for-profit, or I would say a political mailing of 10,000 pieces directed to the theater goers, this combined list, and asking for non-tax deductible donation. So it was a political mailing, and we asked the recipient to fill out the cards, mail them back to us, and we then bundled them to the two United States senators and President Bush. You can see the letter was signed by Rock Schofer, who was at that time chair of the League's Advocacy Task Force, and of course was a huge leader in our community. The piece contained a list of the theaters. You can see here, it says the following 123 organizations are League members. How many have you attended? So it's a nice advertisement for the theater industry in Chicago, and it included a stuffer by the recent Tony Award winning artist from Steppenwolf, Frank Galati. So he wrote this little piece and we dropped it in there. And it was very successful. We had about a 9% return and made more than enough money to pay the League back for the costs of this kind of tedious mailing. This is in the days before computers. Oh my gosh, it was with mag tapes, mailing list house. It was a big, big deal, but it was very successful. The other thing that we did was combine and count all the arts organizations in the major wards in the city. This is something I did independent of the League, but sort of shoulder to shoulder with the League. So we created a city council arts caucus. So these aldermen all received invitations to come to a meeting in City Hall to hear about the power of the arts. And you can see this is in 1993. And you can see that an alderman, Bert Notaris's 42nd Ward, he had 216 arts organizations. And the idea was, you ought to come to this meeting to learn about this important industry in your ward. Maybe you didn't know how big a deal it was because we're all spread out. And so these aldermen came actually to City Council, where I addressed them on April 26, 1993, along with Pat Johnson, who is director of the Chicago Community Arts and Development Project, Sandra Fury, and Willard Boyd of the Field Museum. And you can see Alderman Joe Moore, who represented the 49th Ward for decades, was the sort of host. He became the chair of the short-lived City Council Arts Caucus. And you can see what we were talking about, an overview of the arts and cultural sector, celebrating community arts in Chicago. This is from Pat. She's talking about the arts in the neighborhoods, the arts in the lives of our young people, Sandra Fury from the Urban Gateways, and then the role of museums and the larger cultural institutions by President Boyd of the Field Museum. And then a conclusion by Alderman Moore. This led to a second meeting of the Arts Caucus in the office of the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs in her own office, who was there for a long time, and I don't think she ever had so many city councilmen in the office of the Department of Cultural Affairs at one time. So that was the follow-up meeting. A few years later, I was a presenter at the League's 2004 conference, talking about something called the Creative America Project, in which I was training artists to run for local office all over the country, and we were attempting to start something here. Sadly, all this, you could say the question, we saved the NEA, I guess you could say. It was not destroyed, even though Jesse Helms and his allies escalated what he called the war on filthy art. But they did restrict the rules for funding. And I think we're still living under those restrictions decades later. So I'd say, it was a modest win, but we didn't really get everything we should have gotten. And you can see here, this is a headline from 1990, U.S. Arts Agency to slash grants. One of the prosecutors of all this mess was the Christian Coalition. It became my duty and my, I guess you say, obsession to find out who these guys were. Why were they attacking the arts, which they have done all over America? I have documentation of them attacking the arts from Clearwater, Florida, all the way to Anchorage, Alaska. They raised tens of millions of dollars beating the crap out of us. And they did much more. As you can see from some of these headlines, this is a copy from the New York Times, 1992. Quietly, Christian conservatives win hundreds of local elections. So I've tried over the years in many places and spaces to try to get people from our world to run for local office. And I myself ran for office in 2010. I was the Green Party candidate for Cook County Board President. But my position is that people in our world, certainly the leaders of our institutions, are all perfectly capable of serving in city council, on school boards, and even higher offices. But it sort of fell on deaf ears. But the other side had no such compunction. Here was a headline from 2000: "The right makes might. Judged by their impact on races around the nation, religious conservatives remain a potent political force." Fast forward another 20 some years, and here's the headline from 2022: "On the far right, devout efforts to get elected. Christian fringe pushes into the mainstream." Well, getting to the punchline here, I would say we lost the culture wars and he won them. And what I would say is, let us reflect a little bit on how America got to where it is and what role the arts played or didn't play in this long journey, and what might yet still be done. And so that is really what I wanted to share.